When you compare this X1 Extreme Gen 3 to its biggest competitor, the XPS 9500, that we previously reviewed on this channel, or even the new X1 Carbon Gen 9 that we've recently had in, you can clearly see this laptop is really starting to show its age. The thick bezels, the wasted space around the keyboard deck, and the out-of-place fingerprint sensor. The cooling system also seems a little subpar when you hear that other laptops are getting vapor chambers or using more modern Ryzen 7nm CPUs. But once you start using this laptop, is any of that relevant? Hi, I'm David at Mash IT, and tonight we're going to review the X1 Extreme Gen 3. I'm as fickle as the next consumer. I see a pretty laptop and it draws my attention. I love the look of the XPS 9500, and I also love the look of Razer blades and Alienware laptops. So when I first looked at the X1 Extreme, I wasn't instantly drawn to it, even though I love ThinkPads. Taking a look around the laptop, you can see it's the usual ThinkPad design, and as this is the third generation of this X1 Extreme, it looks exactly the same as the previous 2 years worth of models that came before it. On the top, we have the usual ThinkPad logo with the red lit dot which shows you whether it's sleeping or in use. And as this is the 4K model, we have the carbon fibre weave instead of the normal standard black model. The finish on this carbon fibre weave is still soft touch like the black, and although it can get dirty, it feels luxurious to actually touch and hold the laptop. Now moving on to the left side of the laptop, you can see we start with the power connector. Obviously, being that this has a 6 or 8 core Intel CPU and a dedicated GPU, this laptop needs more than a USB-C charger. So it has a dedicated either 130 or 170 watt power adapter. Moving across, we've got two Thunderbolt 3 ports, we've got an HDMI 2 port, and we've got a headset jack. Now spinning the laptop round to the right, we've got a nano SIM card. If you've got the LTE model. If you don't have the LTE model, you may not have this nano SIM card installed. Then we've got a full-size SD card, being an actual slim workstation. This is really nice. Obviously most media professionals are going to want this SD card, so it's nice having a full-sized one. And followed by two USB 3 ports. And lastly, at the very end, we've got a Kensington lock slot. Now I flip it upside down so we can look at the actual base. Not really a lot to see, but you can see that there is downward firing speakers, which is a real shame. And we've got a massive amount of vent grills for actually the air intake. Lastly, we've got just a few screws, which you can remove the base cover. And if we just take a quick look inside, you can see that the RAM is upgradable. And there's two M.2 80mm slots for SSDs, one of which will be populated. You can also see the battery can be removed, so you can replace that battery. Now, I've actually got the WAN card, so you can see that there's a WAN card installed in here as well. Right, then opening the laptop up. One-handed opening is a bit difficult because it does lift the base off. So there we go, we're just opening the laptop. You can see I can pull the screen back 180 degrees, which is a lovely feature that the ThinkPads have. Something I've always liked about these. It makes it very versatile. Now opening it up, you can see that we've got this poorly placed stickers on the palm rest. We've got the ThinkPad logo on the right and a lovely soft touch finish actually across the palm rest, which although, as we know, can attract fingerprints and stains, it's a really lovely feeling when you've got your palms on here. It's nice when you actually work on it. It's better than cold sort of aluminium to actually use on a day-to-day basis. Moving to the trackpad, it glides nicely. It's really comfortable to use. The gestures work well. I've really enjoyed my time using this touchpad, especially this is one of the things that obviously using the XPS 9500, the trackpad on this is 1,000 times better because there's still so many issues with the trackpad on that laptop. I get so many people still on our trackpad fix video mentioning how bad the play is in their actual touchpad. So this, again, although it is not quite as good looking as the XPS, this is a solid trackpad to use. Moving up to the keyboard, now this is where I'm sort of blown away. I haven't used one of these Extremes for quite a while, and I've been using a lot of modern sort of Ultrabooks and other sort of laptops with much less sort of reduced travel. Using this laptop for the last week, I just cannot believe what a lovely typing experience this is for a laptop. This has got to be my favourite laptop for typing that I've used in easily the last sort of year. It's got amazing sort of crisp feedback, it's got nice deep travel, the concave keys feel great under your fingers, it's got a great layout. There's only one thing that sort of sticks out with regards to the layout is the fact that Lenovo ThinkPads, they always have the function, the control keys sort of flipped around. Now, if you're used to ThinkPads, you'll be used to this anyway, but if you're coming from a different brand, you are probably going to be hitting the function instead of the control quite regularly. Now, you can change this in either BIOS or the Vantage software, but obviously you'll still have the keycaps printed the wrong way around. The keyboard's backlit with 2 stages of adjustable backlight. Because of the contrast between the black keys and the bold white fonts, you very rarely even need to even turn backlighting on because this is so clear and easy to actually see these keys in even low sort of light conditions. And at the top you can see we've got the function keys, which by default use the multimedia settings first, and you press the function to actually activate the function keys. Again, this can be swapped in the Vantage software if you prefer to have the function keys as the primary. On the right of the keyboard you can see we've got a fingerprint reader. This works reasonably well. I do prefer using the Windows Hello built into the webcam, which we'll look at in a little while, but it's nice to have a secondary option. Particularly good because we've got the Think shutter. If you lock that off and you can't use the facial recognition, this gives you a secondary form of logging in. And above that, we've got a power button. You may notice there's no speaker grills on the upper part of this chassis. As we looked at on the bottom, there is just 2 downward firing speakers. There's no upward firing speakers. So we're going to do a very quick speaker test now using our usual royalty-free track from YouTube. This is at 40% volume. Now I'm going to bring it up to 60%. That's 70%. So overall, they're not bad for downward firing speakers. I was expecting much worse, to be fair. This is definitely better than the previous, I think, X1 Gen 1 or Gen 2 that we had. So yeah, not too bad. Again, I'm not a fan of downward firing speakers because it always depends on the surface that you're using the laptop as to how it will sound. But on a solid surface, you could actually listen to a bit of music on it. Now moving up to the screen, you can see the large bezels and an older style 16:9 screen laptop. This model is absolutely begging for a 16:10 panel to be installed in here, like most of the other laptops that are coming out this year have got, such as the X1 Carbon Gen 9 that we've recently reviewed. You can obviously see that this gives it a big chin with the 16:9 bezel that a 16:10 would be dropping down into, which makes the laptop look a lot nicer. And again, because this chassis hasn't been updated for, this is now the 3rd generation, the left and right bezels also are really quite fat compared to most modern laptops. But looking at the screen, I've got the high-end model and I've got the Oled panel in this. It's 400 nits of brightness and wow, what a screen. The Oled is absolutely beautiful. I've not had an Oled panel for quite a while. The last one I've had was an Alienware M13 a few years ago and I've forgotten how good Oled panels are on laptops. Now yes, this will eat into your battery life, but if you're plugged in a lot or you don't care about battery life, this panel is absolutely incredible. It is also a touch screen and you can use a pen which Lenovo can supply you to actually draw on this. Moving up to the webcam, we're just going to quickly test those. So this is a test of the webcam and the microphones on the Extreme X1 Gen 3. And also just above the webcam we have the Think shutter. You can just use your finger to just push that across and you'll notice a little red dot in the actual webcam. That means you've disabled your webcam. So if privacy is a concern, that's a really nice feature. But by doing this, you do disable the Windows Hello that I mentioned earlier on. But as I said, we have that fingerprint sensor, which you can then use to log in because you've disabled that Windows Hello. So it's nice that you've got that sort of double login option for speedy logins. Okay, we're going to take a quick look at the performance now. And before I start looking at the performance, I want to just explain how Lenovo controls the performance on this laptop. Now, for the last couple of generations of Lenovo laptops, they've moved away from using the Vantage to change the performance profile to actually using the Windows power slider. So we've tested it in its power saver mode as well as its full performance mode, and we've also tested this on battery. So the first test we completed is Cinebench, and we completed this on the low power mode first to see how it would respond. This is obviously much lower on the fans, but it still managed to score 2,850 in the lowest power mode. That's pretty impressive. Now bear in mind this is the 8-core 16-thread Intel 10885H CPU, so it's quite a powerful CPU. Now in comparison, the XPS 9500 we reviewed with the 6-core CPU scored 2,442. So this is really good. This is on the lowest power mode. When we bumped it up to the maximum power mode, the fans got an awful lot louder, and this scored 2,933. Now to put the fans in perspective, the default low power mode comes in about 37 decibels, which is, really quite a pleasant noise. You're not going to be bothered by this at all. So if you're, just doing light work, I'd certainly recommend putting it in the low power mode. But on the full power, the max power mode, we're hitting up to 50 decibels when we're really taxing the CPU or CPU and GPU. Now that is quite loud. We were talking almost on gaming laptop sort of noise. So if this bothers you, again, you can just turn that performance down, when you're in a noise sensitive environment. Now, we also completed Cinebench on battery power, and that did surprisingly well. On battery power, we scored 2,886, so very similar to the low power mode, but that's still a really good score with this 8-core processor, so you can certainly work pretty effectively on battery. So the next benchmark we completed is Geekbench 5. Now, on the low power mode, we scored 940 on the single core and 5,517 on the multi-core score. Again, pretty good scores. Now, when we switch that to the full power mode, we've got a single core score of 1,276 with a multi-core score of 5,651. Now, these are really quite solid scores. And we also completed it on the battery, and we scored 1,280 on single core and 5,554 in the multi-core on battery. So again, this laptop does perform really well on battery as well, and that's quite impressive because some laptops, as soon as you take them off the mains, they throttle really heavily. But if you're taking this laptop off of mains and using it on the battery, although you will kill battery life quite fast, you're going to get good performance whilst you're doing it. So next we ran the OpenCL part of Geekbench 5. This was tests the graphics, and with the NVIDIA GPU engaged, we scored 41,969. And on full power mode, we scored 42,371. And lastly, on battery, we scored 40,694. Now this is good news because very often the GPU is heavily capped on battery, but this does really well. So just to test the 3D performance, we ran TimeSpy. Now again, this isn't a gaming laptop, but if you're using 3D rendering, or if you do fancy a few games in your spare time, this is more than capable of doing it. So we ran TimeSpy on the sort of the low power mode first, and we scored 3,551, which had a graphics score of 3,341 and a CPU score of 5,530. Very solid scores for the actual components in here. And the XPS 9500 got a graphics score of 3,713, so it is a bit better, but that is a Max P version of this graphics card, whereas this is a Max Q in the X1 Extreme. But the CPU with its 6-core processor only got 4,756. Now, completing this test again on maximum power, very similar scores. We got 3,579 times by score with a graphics 3329, but the important thing is the CPU is obviously provided more wattage, and we score 6,237. That's quite an impressive score for a sort of content creation laptop in TimeSpy. Now lastly, we wanted to run this on battery as well, just to see how the actual GPU and the CPU would perform on battery, and was pleasantly surprised. We got a score of 3,316 with a graphics score of just slightly lower at 3,097 and a CPU score of 5,540. So again, really impressive scores on battery, and that's something that's really impressed me about this laptop. You can actually use it, quite full pelt on battery. So just to summarise this performance of this laptop, if you whack it into the full power mode, it does get quite loud. It's certainly louder than the previous generations, but they're giving you the performance to go with that. If you push it to the quiet mode, you're not losing that much performance, and the laptop does stay incredibly quiet in comparison. For me personally, whilst I'm working, most of the time I'd probably just have it sitting in the actual quiet mode. Okay, so on to the conclusion. And I have to be honest, this is a difficult conclusion for me to make. I've absolutely loved my time with this laptop. It's such a brilliant machine with great performance. It's also got a good range of ports, and there's plenty of configuration options, such as the WAN, plenty of different screens, and it's got upgradable RAM and 2 SSD slots. But if you walked into a shop and saw this side by side with an XPS 9500, even if they were the same price, you'd probably walk out with the XPS. Then we need to factor in Lenovo's ridiculous RRP. But having spent some time with this laptop, if someone asked me to swap this for an XPS 9500, it would be a flat out no. But if I was going to buy it myself, I'd have to wait for a really good sale or a decent discount coupon to take it down from its ridiculously overpriced RRP to a sensible price. So to sum up, would I buy this laptop at its standard price? Absolutely no way. But if you offered it to me at the same price as an XPS 9500, then I would definitely buy it. Now, hopefully you've enjoyed this video. Please hit the like and the subscribe and the notifications bell, because we've got plenty more laptops coming in over the next couple of weeks, and there's plenty more content coming. And lastly, thank you for watching.